So if you have a wood shop and have the standard wood shop power tools, or maybe you're just a hobbyist getting started, eventually you're going to want some kind of a laser engraver. And probably to start, you're going to look at a diode laser. They're good for engraving, not always as good for cutting because typically they only have 5 watts of true laser power. Well, that's not always the standard. This laser behind me is the Pergear LaserStorm S10. And what makes it special is that it's a full 10-watt laser. And in this video, I want to cover end to end from taking it out of the box to what you would want to use it for. So let's get going. How's it going, everybody? Steve here, and welcome back to the shop. Now, as I mentioned, in this video, I want to do an end-to-end review of the Pergear LaserStorm S10. Now, in full disclosure, they sent this to me at no cost to have a look at and give it a good, honest review. I was pretty clear to them that if there's things I don't like, you'll find out about them. But that isn't my mission. My mission is not to destroy lasers. It's to tell you what's good about it and what you might want to consider in your particular use case, and maybe it is the right laser for you. The characteristic of this one that over a lot of the lasers you can see on Amazon or direct from China is that this one is a 10-watt laser, 10 watts of real output power. Now, it isn't a single diode laser that's 10 watts. What they've done is they have 2 5-watt lasers running side by side, and through the magic of optical integration, they bring them into a single beam path. Now, they don't actually focus on the exact same spot. What they've done is they've made one laser focus slightly higher than the other, so what you effectively get is a very long focus. And that allows you to cut much thicker materials. Now, Pergear says you can cut up to 20 millimeters through wood. I guarantee you, hardware store plywood, if it's 20 millimeters thick, you're not cutting through that in any reasonable way. So we'll have to do some investigation and find out what kind of wood we can cut. But realistically, if they say 20 millimeters, if you're cutting through 10 millimeters of solid wood, that's a pretty good piece of wood. So anyway, what we'll do is we'll do an unboxing here. I won't belabor you through the assembly, but we'll cover some of the high points in assembly, and then we'll do a bunch of testing, and we'll see what this laser looks like. Anyway, let's get started here. All right, so the very first thing we're going to have to do, like we do with all of these diode lasers, is we have to assemble it, and we'll pull it out of the box. Unlike other lasers where the manual is online, this one actually comes with a printed assembly guide. Now, fair warning, this thing includes a lot of small pictures and honestly not a lot of words, so don't assume you're going to be able to build this thing in an obvious way just following the manual, but there are lots of online references, and you can see some of the stuff I did in this video. Anyway, the box itself comes packed in the usual way. Now, one thing I'll call out here right away is they don't include safety goggles, and that's because they claim, Pergear claims that you don't actually need them because the laser itself is covered with a plastic window that has some kind of optical coating on it. It seems like a gap to me. I think there's always a time when you need the goggles, so you might want to pick up a pair of those. Anyway, the frame assembles pretty much in the usual way. Put a couple of screws in at each corner and tighten them up, and you get a nice square frame. So it's, there's nothing really difficult about that. Then the next thing you do is you slide on the kind of pre-assembled X-rail assembly, and it just rolls on there. I didn't have to do any adjustment on it. Put the legs on, again, a couple of screws. Now there's only 3 metal legs because the 4th leg is actually comprised of the control unit. So it works out quite nicely. Control unit just screws on with 2 screws, and you get a really nice solid frame. So now you might recognize this laser. If you've been shopping around, you might look at it and go, oh, that's a Atom Stack S10 or S7 Pro rather, and you'd be right. It looks like it's just a simply rebranded one, but it assembles the same way. So you slide the belts on and put the T-nuts in there and screw them down, and that's a pretty basic assembly. It takes seconds, really. And then you need to run that belt that you strap down on one end and roll it through the rollers in the gear, and then slide it out the back, and you can tighten that rail. It's pretty simple. So you just screw down at the other end, tighten it down, reasonably tight, and when you're finished, you can cut off that excess belt and do the same on the other side, and you have basically the lasers assembled. You do have to adjust the X carriage a bit so that it rolls smoothly, just by adjusting that nut. And then the laser itself slides right on, and you'll notice it is an atom stack laser, in part because I assume this is just some kind of a partnering deal with Atom Stack. The cable connects fairly obviously. You don't have to look at a lot of things. Now this laser does have limit switches, which is really nice, so you have to plug those in. I did find that the cable on the first limit switch, the one back by the controller, was a little tight. So, you got to be careful there. But the rest of it, you plug into the stepper motors and plug the cable into the laser, and you're pretty much ready to go. It's a pretty simple setup. So anyway, you'll get the laser put together really quickly. It took me about, I don't know, I'd say half an hour, but I was trying to record video bits and pieces as well at the same time. But figure 20 minutes, a half an hour, it goes together pretty well. So once you have it up and running, plug it in, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we got everything built here. Now let's take a quick look at what we have. So all of the metalwork is, it's pretty top notch. It's definitely solid. The one complaint though is that I have with a lot of these diode lasers is the cable handling is a little dodgy here. And if I were to plug in the power and the USB, you can see these wires. There's just nowhere you can hang these that they aren't in the way. So I think really what they should have done is put the connectors on the side somewhere. They've already got one here, so they could have easily put a couple more down. But anyway, there are kind of worse things that could happen, I suppose. Now what they have, the drivetrain here is virtually the same as the Atom Stack S10 Pro, and with that you get the same kind of capabilities. So there's limit switches hiding underneath the ends here. Limit switches tend not to be available on entry-level diode lasers. Now this one is more upscale than an entry-level one. It includes the limit switches, and if you're buying a diode laser, you should really consider one that has these limit switches. So in the center, we've got a fairly nice, moving mechanism here. Now on mine, when I took it out of the box, these wheels are clamped very tightly, and you saw I adjusted the bolt under the nut underneath to make it slide better. But when they clamp those things down, clearly at the factory, they tend to flatten the wheels. Now these wheels aren't, they're like a hard plastic, like Delrin or something, so they don't really expand and contract or rebound from that kind of abuse. So you may find slight flat spots. Mine is actually not too bad, but it was a little rough when I started. Anyway, so that's the drivetrain. Only one stepper motor on the x-axis, but that's fine. They have a shaft running in between, so it's pretty good. Big work area. It's 400 by 410, I believe, millimeters. So you can put pretty much anything you want on here. On the controller side, the usual kind of controls, power. There's a reset button. I'm not sure what that's for because it doesn't really seem to do much. an SD card slot, and I have the SD card that came with the laser in there now. There's a couple of drawings and things on it. Important on the safety side, they've got a really nice emergency stop switch. They also have tilt on these, so if the laser gets moved, it will stop. The one nice thing about this laser, which is also characteristic of the Atom stack, is you get a nice display. And if I were to power this on, and I'll apologize for the noise, and I'll tell you why that's an issue. You get a fairly decent display. It's not the best display in the world, but it works well. Now, on the UI side, one complaint is these are actually two files that are on this SD card. And you can see with my fat fingers, these are very close together. So inevitably, you're going to pick the wrong one, and you'll have to go back and pick the other one. For my use case, I typically wouldn't use the display anyway. It's just nice that it's here. Because a lot of these lasers, especially the low-end diode lasers, have no UI at all. So you're pretty much limited to what you can get out of laser Gerbil or light burn. Anyway, it can stick magnetically onto the front. Has a nice flexible cable, so you can actually pull it away from the laser a bit. Oh, the noise. You can hear that fan running. It's actually running inside this diode module, and as you can tell, it's quite loud. So I'm actually going to turn it off, and you can hear it's peace and quiet all of a sudden. Now the laser module itself, it's got a nice mounting mechanism. You can see if I just loosen the screw, I can slide it up and down nicely. And the module, it's an Atom stack module, not surprisingly, but it has this plastic applied to the front with an optical filter on it. So Pergear says you don't need to wear goggles with this laser. I don't know about that. I tend to be very cautious with any kind of laser light. At any rate, it's there. It does filter the light quite nicely. You know, if you decide you want to take a risk without goggles, more power to you. It does have this single screw in the center for tightening and loosening. And I don't know if you can see it, but just putting it on here, literally now, I have not used this laser for anything yet. You can see these kind of burr marks in it, and that's because this is just a normal thumb screw. So what I did was actually pull this out, and I kind of filed off the sharp edges that bolts tend to have on them, and made it a little smoother. So you might want to do that. So other issues, if you get the laser and this piece of acrylic here is the focus plate, if I drop it down to where I would normally have it for cutting, you can see without much force at all, this is quite flexible. So you know, if you want to cut high speed, I would say you have to resolve that problem. The problem is there's only one set of screws holding this plate on the back. They really needed 4 screws, but you know, I guess they're assuming you're not going to go at the speed of light here. So last thing here, equipment that came with the laser. They did include this nice, it seems like a stainless steel plate for just engraving on, a few samples, the USB carrier for this SD card, a nice little brush for cleaning, presumably the inside of this. So anyway, it's a very nice package, and you know, it would certainly look nice on your workbench. Anyway, that's the laser. So what we'll do is fire it up and connect it to light burn. You can also use laser Gerbil, by the way, but I just prefer light burn, and I own a copy of it, so I'll use that. But we'll get it connected here, and we'll try a few samples and see what it looks like. Now what I need to do is connect that LaserStorm 10 to my instance of Lightburn here. So I'm going to go in and select the Find My Laser, And we'll see if Lightburn can find it on the USB bus. It should. Sometimes it doesn't, but a restart of Lightburn will usually fix that. And there it is. It's 410 by 400 millimeters, so that's definitely it. So I'll select that one, and I'll give it a nice suitable name. LaserStorm 10, and you can see the dimensions are set correctly. It has automatically chosen the front left corner as the home position, and it will auto home when I start it up. So that's it. That's all I really need to do here, and the laser is now configured. Now normally, like I said, you sometimes need to restart Lightburn after this, so just out of precaution, I'll actually do that now. Okay, so we have Lightburn restarted. I'll select that laser, and I'll try to go to the home position. It says it's busy, so it did something. And if I hit the get position, it's at 1100. So that's definitely the right spot. And now we're good to go. So if I do a move here, I can see the laser's actually moving. And if I hit home, it'll go back to the home position. So there we go, the laser's up and running. Next, we'll just grab an image and we'll try and do just a test, and we'll see what happens. I have my favorite dog picture here, and it's just a fairly small engrave. It's 70 millimeters by 55 millimeters, so it won't take too long to engrave. But we'll just do basically an untouched photo. I just imported this directly, so there's no enhancements made to it. And as far as settings, we'll just, I mean, this is really the first time this laser's been turned on, so everything's a bit of an unknown, but I'll start with about 8,000 millimeters per minute and power around 90%. And then we'll just have some power to cut the outline. And I'll do this in cardboard, which is usually the first thing I test with. Just because if there are mistakes, it's easy to well, it's free basically, so it's easy to do another one if I need to. Anyway, we'll get this going, and we'll see what the result looks like. Okay, I did a bunch of engraving and a cut, and let's take a look. So I did my standard dog photo on, in this case, cardboard, and came out fairly nicely. Because I don't have any settings for 10-watt lasers, it was a bit of a random guess. It actually turned out fairly well. I did a couple of attempts before I got it to something acceptable, but anyway, it's there. MDF, which is a fairly common, or particle board, depending on where you come from. It's fairly common, and you can see in the case of the word design, the background and the little pie slice, they're actually different shades than the main text, and you can see it actually kind of drew those out fairly well. So it rendered the grayscales pretty close. Dark acrylic, and this is actually translucent, so it's even a little more difficult. You can see it did fairly well there. Again, the background on design and the slice pie, or the pie slice rather, is came out distinguishably different than the main word. And finally, stainless steel, and the bottom engraving here is from the Pergear Laser 2, and with the exact same settings, both power and speed. The top one is the LaserStorm 10, and you can see it's actually quite a bit darker if I kind of hold it together here, yet it still makes the distinction between the different shades. Now you will notice the S here is a little jangy. It's got a bit of a ripple in it, and that, as near as I can tell, was actually something to do with my setup, not anything to do with the laser. I just had the plate sitting there on the workspace, and I think the workspace moved. Finally, a cut. This is 6 millimeter, 6 and almost 7 millimeter solid maple, and about 8 passes at 100%. I think it was 8. And it cut through that fairly well. A bit of charring on the sides, but that can be expected as it's cutting through. This is very, very hard. It is solid maple. So anyway, it did the cut there. And it might actually be able to cut through a 20 millimeter piece of pine or poplar of some sort. So anyway, there you go. There's the output. Looks pretty good. So now let's take a look at some of the things I liked and didn't like so much about this laser. On the pro side, it's got a good traditional design with a really nice work area, that 400 by 410 millimeters, ample space for most things. Connectivity, getting this plugged into Lightburn was super simple. A couple of clicks and I was there. The power, of course, is definitely a high spot here. That extra 5 watts on the 10 watt module makes a real difference cutting and engraving. And last on this list is safety. It's got that light shield is really nice as far as protecting you, although you don't get goggles with this laser, which seems kind of odd. It's got the usual till protection kind of features and that really nice emergency stop button. The addition of a display is kind of a nice add if you're doing a lot of moving files on SD cards, but for me it wasn't such a big deal. Now on the con side, there were a few things I didn't like quite so much. The fan I mentioned, the fan inside that laser module is quite loud. It runs all the time. And, it's a bit louder than I think it should be for what this laser is. Cable handling, like most of these diode lasers, is a bit dodgy. Cables just kind of hang out on the table or, flop in free air. Seems a little iffy. The assembly guide I mentioned, also not a great guide. Really small pictures, not a lot of words, just hard to kind of decipher what it's talking about. And finally on this list, I mentioned that Z-axis seems a little flimsy, though I doubt that it's going to bother you much in normal engraving and cutting. So take these for what they're worth and make your decision based on those. Anyway, that's the pros and cons. So final analysis time, would I recommend one of these? Yeah, I think so. If your use case is very specifically you're doing a bit of cutting over standard engraving, then a 10 watt laser is going to be much more useful to you. Also on the engraving side, if you're engraving something like stainless steel, this will make that job a lot faster, so you don't have to work quite as hard. So you might want to consider it for that as well. And there will be an affiliate link down below. If you decide you're going to buy one of these and you want to help out the channel, feel free to use that. With that, we'll kind of wind this video down and get out there and make your world, and I'll see you next time.